Camus on rebellion. Why humans resist meaninglessness. The human spirit, perhaps its most defining trait, is not its capacity for reason, but its inherent and stubborn refusal to accept the absurd. Albert Camus, the Algerian-born philosopher and author, didn't just observe this resistance. He placed it at the very heart of his ethical and existential framework. While his early work, notably The Myth of Sisyphus, diagnosed the absurd, the painful clash between our innate human desire for meaning and the universe's cold, indifferent silence, it was his major treatise, The Rebel, L'Homme Révolté, that proposed a radical and constructive response: rebellion. This is not mere revolt, a chaotic outburst, but a principled, conscious, and ultimately compassionate act of metaphysical refusal. The genesis of the no, defining the absurd condition. To understand Camus' rebellion, we must first truly grasp the absurdity he describes. It's not the meaninglessness of existence itself that is the problem. It is the confrontation between our passionate, meaning-seeking consciousness and the world's radical, indifferent silence. Camus saw three possible responses to this confrontation, two of which he rejected. 1. Suicide. Acknowledging the absurd, but choosing to annihilate the conscious self, thereby annihilating the confrontation. Camus calls this a philosophical evasion, a leap into nothingness that solves nothing. 2. The philosophical leap. Embracing a religious or ideological faith that transcends reason and offers an artificial, ready-made meaning. This too is evasion, a leap of faith that denies the integrity of the absurd confrontation. The third response is rebellion. It begins with the realization, I protest, or I refuse. It is the moment an oppressed slave, in the face of an unjust command, draws a line in the sand and says, thus far and no further. This is not mere revolt, a chaotic outburst, but a principled, conscious, and ultimately compassionate act of metaphysical refusal. The genesis of the no, defining the absurd condition. To understand Camus' rebellion, we must first truly grasp the absurdity he describes. It's not the meaninglessness of existence itself that is the problem. It is the confrontation between our passionate, meaning-seeking consciousness and the world's radical indifference. Camus saw three possible responses to this confrontation, two of which he rejected. 1. Suicide. Acknowledging the absurd, but choosing to annihilate the conscious self, thereby annihilating the confrontation. 2. The philosophical leap. Embracing a religious or ideological faith that transcends reason and offers an artificial, ready-made meaning. This too is evasion, a leap of faith that denies the integrity of the absurd confrontation. The third response is rebellion. It begins with the realization, I protest, or I refuse. It is the moment an oppressed slave in the face of an unjust command draws a line in the sand and says, thus far and no further. The metaphysical and historical dimensions of rebellion. Camus differentiates between two core types of rebellion that, while linked, have distinct outcomes. 1. Metaphysical rebellion, the defiance against creation. This is the initial pure form of rebellion, defined by the rebel's absolute refusal to accept the human condition as it is, its finiteness, its suffering, and its ultimate lack of divine guidance. The metaphysical rebel challenges the very nature of creation. They do not seek to overthrow a tyrant. They seek to overthrow God, or the principle of cosmic order. The core drive here is the demand for unity, clarity, and eternal justice. Since the world offers only fracture and injustice, the rebel must create a parallel world of values. Camus argues that this act of saying no is simultaneously an act of saying yes to a new shared value. The moment I say this is unintolerable, I affirm that a tolerable standard exists, and that I, along with all others, have a right to it. This defiant no thus establishes the first human value, solidarity. 2. Historical rebellion, the slide into nihilism. Camus meticulously examined how this initial pure impulse of rebellion, the demand for justice and unity, historically spirals into its own perversion, nihilism and tyranny. This is his most urgent and original contribution. He traces a chilling lineage from the French Revolution to the totalitarian movements of the 20th century, fascism and Bolshevism. He argues that when the metaphysical rebel tries to totalize their rebellion, to make it the absolute law of the earth, they often replace the old indifferent God with a new all-encompassing ideology. The perversion? The demand for absolute justice in a finite, imperfect world inevitably requires absolute power and the sacrifice of others. If the ideology promises a perfect future, any means necessary, including mass murder, becomes justifiable in the present. Camus saw this in the justification of homicide by revolutionary terror. The irony? The movement intended to affirm the intrinsic value of human life ends up devaluing individual human lives for the sake of an abstract future humanity. This is the point where the rebel becomes an executioner, denying the very solidarity that sparked the rebellion in the first place. Creating value on the razor's edge, the ethics of measure. The true challenge for Camus is how to sustain the spirit of rebellion without letting it collapse into nihilistic tyranny. The solution is found in the Greek concept of measure or limit. The authentic rebel operates on the razor's edge. They acknowledge the absurdity, refuse to meaninglessness, and act to alleviate suffering without seeking absolute power or an absolute historical end. Solidarity over ideology. Rebellion is a communal act. I rebel, therefore we exist. The rebel must fight with their fellow humans, not for an abstract concept of humanity that justifies the murder of real people. The shared condition of the absurd is what binds us. The measure. We must recognize the limits of our action. We can fight injustice, but we cannot create paradise. We must never sacrifice a living man for an abstract principle. This is the ethic of the relative good, doing the most good possible in a world where ultimate perfection is an illusion. Camus champions the action of the doctor, the artist, and the union worker, those who fight specific, tangible injustices, sickness, boredom, poverty, without claiming to have solved the whole human condition. The artist as the quintessential rebel. For Camus, the artist is the most perfect example of the authentic rebel. The artist sees the beautiful chaos of the world, refuses to simply copy it, and instead creates a work that reorders and unifies that chaos within a finite, measured frame, the canvas, the novel, the play. They choose what to reject and what to affirm. They impose a limit, the frame, form, on the limitless reality. They provide a temporary, human-made unity and clarity that the indifferent universe denies us. In creating a work of art, the artist does not solve the absurd, but they transfigure it. They make the human world a little more bearable, a little more beautiful, and a place where shared values can genuinely flourish. The enduring call to resist. Camus' philosophy of rebellion is ultimately a passionate argument for lucidity and compassion. It tells us that our resistance to meaninglessness is not a futile tantrum, but the foundation of our humanity. It is the perpetual, measured refusal to submit to injustice, whether it comes from the cosmos or from a man who claims absolute truth. It is the brave, conscious embrace of the present, imperfect struggle. To rebel